Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey, it's Jessa. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. So glad you're here with me to talk about yet another thing related to becoming an easily intimate couple. And, before you can do that, of course, you have to be a couple. So I am talking to Marni Battista today, who runs a site called Dating with Dignity. She's a dating coach and she hosts a podcast. And the topic today is dating in midlife or beyond, right? What if you find yourself back in the dating world, single again? Or, maybe single for a really, really long time, but what are the options? Dating as a little bit of an older person. Maybe you haven't done this in a really long time. Where can you sign up? What kind of help can you get? What kinds of obstacles do you face? What are the expectations these days? How does it all work? That is the topic. And we do go a little bit into dating in quarantine because as I recorded this interview with her, we are in the midst of quarantine for COVID. And as she points out, there's some, kind of cool, creative ways to still be out meeting people and socializing and connecting, whatever your degree of comfort with social distancing or not. Anyway, you don't have to put everything on pause. You can proceed. So I hope you enjoy the show and you get a lot out of it. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so that you can actually just enjoy your sex life with zero stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. Marni, thank you so much for being on the show with me.
I'm so happy to be here and to see you.
Yeah, I know. It's so nice to have the connection through Zoom, which I'm getting kind of used to these days. So
yes, we all are.
Right. So first, just so people know, first part of the show, I really want to talk about what it's like dating in mid or later life, like going back into dating and things to consider or advice you have for people there. And then I do want to specifically talk about dating in the time of COVID quarantine, because this, right now, as we're recording this, we're all stuck at home and I have no idea how long that's going to go. So
yes, it's very interesting right now.
Yeah. I bet some curveballs for dating, right? So where do we start? So people that are coming into dating later, widowed, divorced, they probably haven't used dating apps. The lay of the land must be so unfamiliar to people. So what do you think some of the biggest challenges are people face, and how different is it depending on the reason you find yourself dating at this stage?
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is that we all have a bunch of stories that we have made up about what it will be like. And so whether it's a nightmare, it'll be easy. I mean, I talked to women who were like, I had no idea it was going to be this hard. Or there's no X kind of guy, or I'm too old, I'm too big, I'm too successful, the apps suck, and I love the apps. I mean, it's sort of, it runs the gamut. So I think the first thing to do is to look at what are all the stories that I have and just write them all down.
Oh.
Right? Just get them out there and then decide, how you're going to find out if it's true or it's not. And if you're going to be really, in a place of taking a ton of self-responsibility is to say, And the ones that make it so that I don't want to go for it are those just excuses or fears, right? Because a lot of times we're just like, yeah, it's a nightmare. There's no good men. And then it's so easy to say, well, I just would never do that, or I would never try that. And it's just totally convenient because you're actually terrified.
All right. So if somebody has stories that there's no good man, or I'm too big, or I'm too old, how do you disprove those? Or, what do you do with those kinds of fears and stories, which I totally get could block somebody from starting to engage?
Yeah. So one of the first things to do is to ask yourself, how true is that really? And the most simple thing you can do is, if you're a size 14 or a 16 or something, go online and just Google, women in size 16 in relationships. Or my favorite one to do, big or curvy celebrities married.
Huh.
Or what? I mean, I did that when I was like, I should date someone. I should be open to dating someone shorter than myself. And then I Googled it and I was like, oh my God, look at all these beautiful, amazing women that are married to or in relationships with men who are shorter than them. So you will go and you might say, oh, well, that's because Rebel Wilson is famous or rich. And you're like, is it really? I don't really think so. So notice that it's around you. Also, it can be just if you are even out for a walk or at the market, you can look around and see who is with who, or who has a ring on her finger, because it's just total BS.
Yeah.
There is really, truly someone for everyone.
Okay. What other kinds of obstacles do people face getting back, potentially back into dating after loss of a partner one way or another?
Well, my favorite one is, and this is kind of mind blowing, but we work with women and we actually also, we do the internal work and, that kind of thing, but then we actually launch them. And so we look at their dating image. And I will say, and this is not an exact number, but it's around 85 to 95% of the women we work with wear clothes for them that are too big.
Huh. So they don't know how to style themselves and then present with this image that they've got to put on a profile.
Exactly. And it's not limited to women who are curvy. Even smaller women are still, we had a woman, beautiful woman, maybe a size 6 or something, really successful, flips homes, totally has it together, in her late 50s. Actually, she's 61. And she worked with our image consultant and she was like, by gosh, I need to raise my hem up. Right? And this is not a fuddy-duddy person. It's just that her hem was about 1.5 inches too long. She was like, I would never wear a red dress. I would never wear anything fitted. And it's like we have to rejigger our image back to the sexual, sensual, feminine woman, not just because my image consultant tells this story how she realized her kid was 5 years old. She got divorced and she was getting ready to go on dates and she still had nursing bras in her lingerie drawer.
That's a riot.
Right? Which, you get into a groove, you're married, you don't really think much about it. They're probably coming to your office, for sexual therapy, counseling. But the bottom line is she was like, oh my God, I'm wearing baggy clothes. I'm wearing nursing bras. So notice wherever you are in your life, and do your clothes look like the life you had or an old identity?
It's interesting because it seems like there's not quite the mechanical, but there's the understanding styling and what translates in a photograph and stuff like that. But you're also talking about how do you start to think of yourself as someone who would be out dating, who would be sexual, who would be, that might have been a long time ago if you had been partnered for quite a while. Right? It's like, how do you?
Totally. And so I love it. When we put a curvy woman in a really awesome pair of fitted black leggings and a top that's fitted with a V-neck to show off her awesome chest and a leather jacket and a little heel. And she's like, oh my God, I look good. And so then, you have to make sure your identity reflects it. But that is just in terms of what is attractive, getting over the emotional hurdle of dressing like your new life for dating can be just a massive obstacle.
And that's got to be more for just a profile picture, right? It's like, how do you start to be this person in this phase of your life? Yeah.
Well, yeah. And also going out on a date.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just say, I have a story of a woman also who was pretty chesty, and she went on like one of the first dates when she was getting back into it, and she had a jacket on, and she noticed that she was constantly like fidgeting with it, covering herself. Just lots of things that we do when we're feeling insecure or not comfortable with ourselves.
Yeah.
So just be aware of it. Practice. I mean, especially at the beginning, it's practice.
Yeah. And you did talk about inner work too, which you sort of said quickly, but it seems like that would make sense. Like, who are you going to be at this phase of your life moving forward? And how are you going to get comfortable in your own skin and your own self? You know, because the more comfortable we are, the more we'll be ourselves out on a date.
Well, exactly. And what's interesting is, again, we pick up all these stories, you know, I have had clients who are married for 25 years, and they have a lot of stories even around sex, or that they weren't sexy because their husband didn't want to sleep with them anymore. And then they will go out and a guy will be physically attracted to them, and then they don't believe it, or they think he's got motives around it. Right. So that's why I say, write all this stuff down, go through sex, money, physical care, just get all the stories, all the things you're uncomfortable about, and then figure out a way to handle that before you date. Because one of the things that very hard lesson I learned is the best way to get over someone is not to get under someone else.
I think that's a song lyric too, right? That's such a great line.
Yeah. So don't do that. Don't be like, oh, well, I just got divorced. Let me go online, or let me just because you're not really ready. And then that can just turn into a whole you just create a whole nother set of problems for yourself.
Yeah. Although I can imagine there are people who enjoy that freedom, and I get to go be sexual again and go play and have a second, not adolescence, but the people might want a period of more casual sexual relationships, or just go have fun without seeking a partner. Like a long-term partner, right?
Yeah. And I actually recommend it, especially if you were, married when you were 21 and were married till you were 50, it's really important. I think developmentally, and I was married at 22 and got divorced at 38. And I was like, wow, I could choose right now. I could have fun right now. And that was really, really important. I think, the name of my business is Dating with Dignity, because you can totally do that. You're the only person who knows how you feel when you wake up the next morning. And there was at least a year or so where I was like, I feel good. I was like, I'm going to leave now. That was fun, and then I realized that I was starting to want more of an emotional connection. And then you kind of do the next level of work. So be honest with yourself. Give yourself permission. If you want to be a little hoe, go for it. As long as you feel really good about it and you're safe and all of those things that make you feel like that you have self-respect, then I totally give you permission to do it. And then you'll be honest with yourself. That phase might last one date or a year or two. You're going to have to decide, and then you got to go to the next level. It's like ratcheting up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I would add in, also be honest with whoever you're with, because men or women, either way, if you're going to go have fun, just make sure your partners know that's what you're doing.
Yes. And I have a friend, who is a man who was married for 26 years. He met his wife when he was 16. So he was sort of doing that. And he was telling me, I keep telling these women, I just got divorced. I am I'm trying to get my custody shit together. I'm trying to figure out how to be a single dad. I totally am having fun with you. I'm not looking. And he said, so many women were like, oh, let me try and change your mind. You'll fall in love with me.
Right.
And so for men and women who are listening, if the other person gives you the disclaimer, which I think is super fair and appropriate, believe them.
Yeah. That's generally good advice across the board. If they tell you something, just believe them. Don't think you're going to change them. It's all that wishful thinking. Not with me.
Exactly. So so pay attention.
All right. So you just mentioned children. I think or did my head go to that? Anyway,
I did. No, I
realized, okay.
I said custody, yeah.
It's been a long quarantine. That seems like another obstacle, potentially, if you've been widowed, you have full-time custody of your kids. If you're divorced, you might have split custody, which could give you some free reign. But there's this, questions around dating when you have kids. When do they meet? How do people navigate that? Do you have some general advice around?
Yeah, well, I would say
when you're a parent?
Yeah, and I would say definitely don't make your kids like an accessory or a way to meet up that feels like you use them as a little buffer zone. So I'm not a fan of let's meet at the park. I go there with my kids anyway. Or have my kids this week. I couldn't see you till next week. Why don't we just meet up at the park or at the beach or at the whatever? I'm not a fan. Don't confuse your kids. They're like, oh, this is my friend Jeff, and they're like, that's weird. So kids they're sponges, and I'm not a parent expert, but I can say that from experience. So I would say date at a time when you are completely present with the person you're dating, that you're on a date with, that you give yourself permission to do that. I've worked with women and men who have 100% custody. And then I would say give yourself permission to either do like a co-op or an exchange or a trade if you can't have the resources for a babysitter. Make sure that you create space and time for yourself to do that. And then I think, the when do you meet somebody is, again, what feels right to you. I would recommend that when you decide whatever your contract is, right? And so that for many people is we're exclusive. We're not dating other people. We're having sex, whatever it is. And then do it in a gradual way. So then it's a great time to say, we're going to go to the park. I want you to meet my new friend, right? And that when you do that, it's really short. So another mistake is, when Disneyland opens up or your equivalent thereof, it's not like spend the first day and you're doing 7 hours together, like a day at the beach, because it's just too much and your kid will start to feel jealous. Yeah. So you want to do a gradual thing.
Right.
And then the last thing, which I think is really important too, is that you have a direct conversation with the person you're dating about what you expect their role to be with your kids.
Oh, that's a whole other thing. Having done some therapy with people who are step parenting, it's like that's or those kinds of roles. That's got to be another show.
It is another show. So, and I'm married to someone. I've been with him for 11 years. My youngest was 6 when we met. Now she's 18. So he will tell anyone who asks. In my world, he has to be comfortable with the fact that sometimes he's the fourth important.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And what are his roles? So yeah, it's a conversation. Don't ignore it. Listen to the other show and then adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Maybe a random question, but I know I've read that older people and elderly have a very high rate of STI transmission and getting, because they weren't used to using condoms back in the day. So I'm thinking about somebody who's been with one partner for whatever, 10, 15, 20, 30 years and now is out dating. What do they need to know about being safe with their sexual experiences?
Well, I love this topic, and I'm sure you talked about this a lot, but it's amazing to me that people are so embarrassed to talk about STIs or condoms, or right now, even with COVID, like people are ashamed that they want to do COVID restrictions a certain way. And I'm like, okay, but you're going to let him put the ding dang in the wing wang. You're cool with that, getting naked, but you don't want to have a conversation. So I would say you want to be as comfortable communicating with someone that you're going to sleep with, whether it's casual or not. And that if you are afraid to have that conversation, get curious about it. Are you afraid of being rejected? Do you view that as needy, as weak? Like, what's the story about it? Because if you're going to be sleeping with someone, you want to be able to talk to them, whether it's about how they put the ding dang in the wing wang or wearing a condom or whatever it is. So if you're afraid to talk about it, that's a big red flag for yourself. So figure out why, and then you just got to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the various alternatives that people have in terms of dating now? Like, where do you find people? How do you,
how do you, well, that's a great question, in that there's like so many options that it could be overwhelming. I think, where we're recording this now is, it's a pandemic happening. So the options are a little bit more limited, although my daughter's 25 and she was out surfing, social distancing, and, someone approached her. So it can be done out in the real world from 6 feet apart. That said, right now and always I think actually now it's 63% of relationships come from online. So, don't be afraid of it. It doesn't mean you're desperate. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're not selective. There are plenty of really busy, high quality men and women that are online. So that's a great place. We recommend, and I do not get any kind of kickback, but we recommend Match. Right now, it really depends upon when the algorithm is doing, what features they have, how they're adjusting the platforms. So it really does depend. But right now, we're recommending Match. I think the thing you don't want to do is get on like 4 apps and 2 dating sites and start juggling it around. Pick one site and maybe one app, devote 30 minutes a day to it, meaning answering people, sending messages out, whatever it is that you're doing, and take it seriously. It doesn't work if you do it like, let me just try this. It just, you're half in it and you're going to get a half result.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to just take a short little break here, and I want to let you know about Intimacy with Ease, the method that helps otherwise happy couples create a sex life that is fun, easy, light for both people. So if you are an otherwise happy couple, if sex is the elephant in the room or sex is the little bit of the challenge for you guys, you may want to check this out. You can go to intimacywithease.com and you'll see information there. You'll see short videos. You'll have access to a full webinar about it. All kinds of information to let you know if this would be the right thing for you. Are there any apps or sites that you kind of recommend avoiding for people later in life that are either meant for young people or meant for just hooking up or I don't know, that somehow could be
Yeah, no, that's a great question too. I mean, I don't love anything that's super free, like Plenty of Fish, not a fan. I can't tell you why I don't recommend eHarmony exactly, other than that our anecdotal data over the last decade is people rarely meet on eHarmony, even though I know tons of people meet on eHarmony. It's just very cumbersome. The question is just a lot. So I don't recommend those. I think that there are smaller sites that are like niche sites, for example. So what often we recommend, if you know that you have strong Christian faith and you really want that, there's a great site called Christian Mingle, and we've had people meet on there. If you are a fitness person, there's great fitnesssingles.com. We've had people who look at there's a I think it's called consciousmeat.com for like spiritual people. So a niche site is cool, but just know that the pile of men or women is smaller.
Right.
So if it doesn't work or you don't get a ton of response, don't be too disappointed. And remember, it only takes one.
Yeah. Yeah. And then isn't there I think I've seen ads for like silver singles or something for 50 plus.
I cannot confirm or deny. And
okay.
So no, we have never had anyone use that one successfully. Yeah.
Okay. What are the other options besides, other things people might think about doing besides online dating?
Yeah. So I always say, be the person you want to attract. So that means get involved in the things that you really love and engage in them. And then when you're doing them, put your phone down and engage, right? And connect with people. So whether it's taking golf lessons or tennis lessons, or if you're like into investments, go join an investment group. There are so many places and ways to meet now virtually and in real life. Pick the things that you're really interested in. If you're a sommelier, like go on a wine situation. We had one of our clients an avid sailor. She was like, I've been a member of this yacht club in San Diego for like over a decade. There's no single men. We worked on some of her limitations. Her boyfriend totally sails and she met him at the yacht club. So, you will be surprised to know that there are men and women where you are now. It's just that if you have a lot of those stories and,
you'll see them, right?
And you're wearing your clothes from 1997, you probably won't be noticed or you won't notice them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that ties into something I'm always talking to people about, which is be strongly yourself, pursuing your interests, be your own individual person instead of desperate to find someone to complete you, so the idea of finding your own passions and enjoying them, to go to because you enjoy them, not because you're looking for your date,
Yeah. And also be aware, like choose at least one thing that's going to have men, right? So like I love to knit, but I'm not going to go to the knit shop to meet men. But I would love to be in a co-ed book club, right? Like that's a really great thing. Or a movie situation. Or like I said, a lot of other activities, co-ed soccer. If you're active, do something active. I have a client who she went on her dream trip hiking in Nepal like 3 years ago. She had done all the inner work and she met her guy on the road, on the hike.
Yeah. I know that way back in the day on my podcast, I interviewed a matchmaker. I don't know if that's something you've ever had experience. And then on the airplane, I have seen those ads for It's Just Lunch. Any thoughts about those vehicles?
Well, I have lots of friends who are matchmakers, so it's not personal. I feel, especially for women in their 40s and up, matchmaking is just not nice for your ego at all.
Okay.
Matchmakers are often, first of all, their clients have to have a certain income level. And so they're looking often, if they have male clients in their 60s, 70s, those tend to be the men who have an unrealistic idea of who is appropriate for them. Mm. And so they're going to want women in their 20s and 30s. And so I have had so many clients just feel like crap because the matchmaker will say, it's really hard for me to match you. This is really going to be hard for me. Or we don't take women on. And it's nothing wrong with you. It's just who their customer is.
Okay.
So don't ever believe the story that quality men of our age group want young women. Some do. They're probably not the men that you want to date anyway.
Yeah.
So there's that. I think the other thing is that the methods that matchmakers use aren't going to get you the best quality, meaning that, and again, I'm in groups with matchmakers and once a week there's a post. I have this person. Does anyone know someone? Right? Or they're posting it on social media or they're pulling people off the street, right? Oh, he's handsome. I need a 50-year-old, blah, 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 blah. So again, not all matchmakers do that. And I'm sure there are amazing matchmakers who will match women who are older. I most often hear women who are very frustrated by that process. So I don't recommend it as a go-to. If you want to do it efficiently, learn like a strategy, have a plan. Don't just do it half-assed. So think about why was I going to hire a matchmaker? And figure out another way.
Do you think it's more effective? I mean, you work with women. Do you think it's maybe more effective for men to use a matchmaker or not really that much better?
I don't know in that I have had some male clients when I first started my practice that did not have luck. Yeah. That said, they wouldn't be here if they didn't have some level of success.
Right.
So that's sort of my take. I just would say learn how to fish rather than have someone catch you fish.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And then what's the process with dating these days? What do you recommend in terms of progression, in terms of spending time with somebody, in terms of safety, meeting somebody online, who pays, what's sort of the, what do people need to know about how does this work 20, 30 years after?
Yeah. So what's really interesting is I think we're in a turning point right now with the pandemic in that it is, I think, going to bring things back to center. So if you would have asked me this in January 2020, I would have said this, and I think it's still true to some extent, that if you are a single woman, you have to understand that men now worry about two things: that you're going to reject them and that they're going to be perceived as a predator. Men didn't used to really think about that. They were just like, I'm afraid she's going to say no and that my ego will be bruised and it's really embarrassed. So now you're going to have to really make it very obvious that you want someone to pursue you. And that can be very direct. You know, one of my favorite lines is, if you asked me out on a date, I would definitely say yes.
Okay.
Right. I interviewed someone.
Or if you asked me in for a nightcap, I would say yes. Or if you asked me up to your bedroom, I would say yes.
Yeah, totally. Well, depending upon what it is. Absolutely.
Right.
So, and I think that men are really concerned about that. So the good guys don't want to be perceived as predators. I was interviewing a guy for my show the other day and he was like, I can't remember the last time I picked somebody up at their house. I mean, that used to be a thing, right?
Yeah.
When I was dating the first time. So, but you can have someone pick you up at your house. So if back when you dated in 1974, men picked you up and now nobody's offering and you think, God, what's wrong with this guy? I would just say he's terrified. So, and they are afraid to even suggest restaurants. Because what if you're gluten free or dairy free and he picks, Il Forno and then you weren't happy. So they're scared. They need direction. I'd love to go out to dinner. I don't have any food allergies. So surprise me. Or, if I have a dairy allergy and I know a couple restaurants that are nearby me and some near you, would you prefer me pick or do you want to pick? I mean, you have to just make it really clear. That's why the communication thing has never been more important.
Yeah.
So, and I recommend that for women that you don't pay at the beginning, don't offer unless you actually want to pay. Because I've also had women do the purse grab and then the guy goes, okay. And then they're like, what a jerk. I'm like, then why did you offer? So, and I think I'm old fashioned. So I'm a fan if a guy pays on the first date, even the second date. By the third date, I think it's great to say, thank you for dinner. I'd love to go for a drink and let it be on me, or let me buy dessert. Or, I was thinking I could take you to brunch this weekend if we see each other, right? So that you're starting to make it reciprocal.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of safety, I mean, what do you usually advise? I mean, you probably don't advise someone, don't give them your home address and have you pick them up at home, right? When you're meeting somebody from online.
Well, here's the thing. It really depends on your own personal level of safety. I think that before you even go out on a date, there's a lot of things that you can do. I do recommend the first date be at a low commitment place for a low commitment amount of time. So, right now, whether it's a socially distant, share, bring your own bottle of wine and drink half and save the rest for later. Right. Or a coffee or whatever it is that you're doing, let's meet up. I have an hour on Friday afternoon. I have an hour on Saturday. And that way it's got a short beginning, a middle, and an end. And that way you can start to, build trust, see how they show up between the dates. Does he call? Does he follow through? And then, I wouldn't recommend, inviting a guy to your home the first time you meet him and just going for it. I think you're putting yourself at risk. That being said, I totally have no judgment because there are certain people who feel like they want to do that. And it depends on where they live and where they are. And
right.
So it's just about being savvy.
Yeah. Are there any other things like red flags people should be listening for or other steps to take to be safe?
Yeah. So I think, catfishing is a thing. And so, if by the third or fourth email or text message, they're not asking you out, or they have a story about why they can't ask you out. And then as a backup, if you say, great, well, I'm really looking for something long term right now. And in order to know if we have chemistry, I need to go to the next level. So why don't we Skype or FaceTime or Zoom or whatever it is? And if he's like, oh, well, it's like, no, especially now. So if someone doesn't do a video situation, be very, 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 very skeptical.
Okay.
And I would ask for that sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Okay. So that leads a little bit into quarantine, COVID, dating. Are we all just confined to our homes alone for the rest of our lives, miserable? What are people's options?
Well, it's so crazy. I mean, honestly, one of the things that's really coming up for our clients right now is the social tension created by different ways that people are interpreting quarantine geographically, morally, spiritually, all of those sorts of things. So it's like politics in a lot of ways. And so depending upon where you are, and this could be broadcast, who knows what it'll be like next week, right?
Right.
So I think the most important thing to do is to say that, number one, that if you are not comfortable being in physical contact with someone, you absolutely can still completely have an amazing experience by starting off virtually. We have clients that are crushing it in the virtual realm and doing that progression, right? Like, would you like to jump on FaceTime for 10 minutes? Great date. We should do a Zoom date for an hour. Okay, great. Like, do you want to do, and people are being super creative with their dates, whether it's a different background. Want to go to Paris? Sure. I'll order you some French food from Postmates and a bottle of wine and let's put our screens with the Eiffel Tower and let's go to Paris. I mean, there's a lot of creativity. So don't let this be an excuse. I think the other great thing is that because there is no easy, quick hookup for most people, that there are many more people online who are actually looking for a serious relationship, and there are no distractions, whether it's the number of drinks that you order or the loud jazz music at the club you would go to, or the movie that you'd be watching and not speaking to each other. This is forcing us to actually have real conversations. So it's a throwback. And so for someone who dated a long time ago, this will be easy for you because that's how it was in the olden days. You didn't take your pants off and you just talked for a long time. So in that way, it's super awesome. And then if you're comfortable doing social distancing dates, my gosh, we have clients, especially now that the weather is warmer. It's like you could go on a 6-foot distance hike. You can go on a 6-foot distant picnic. There's lots of things you could do. And then as you start to get to know that person, you're asking them, what is your quarantine like? How many people are you exposed to? How would you want this to progress? Again, it goes back to communication. And I feel like for a lot of our clients now, it's like having the sex talk is having the pandemic talk, or when AIDS was around, right? You had to just talk about this thing. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah, cool. I love the idea of ordering somebody dinner and then changing your background. I never would have thought about that. It's really cool.
There's a lot of things you can do.
Yeah. Anything that we've missed in terms of something you'd want to cover around dating, after divorce or midlife?
I think that one of the most important things that someone can say is that whether you had a great relationship or a horrible relationship, that you get to have the next part of your life, and that we have different versions of our lives. If we think back, I'm 53, almost 54. I think back when I was 20 or 30, I felt like it was a different lifetime, and we get to have those. And if we're lucky enough to look back on our 40s, 50s, 60s and be in our 80s or 90s, it's like, why would you not go for it?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. There's so much opportunity, and we are never too old to fall in love. And my favorite story about that is not a client, but when my mom passed away, my dad met my mom. My mom was like 14. My dad was 18. They got married when they were 22 and 26. They were married for 45 years. And when my mom passed away, my dad was lonely, and I totally encouraged him and helped him get online. And my dad would have said he went on 2 dates his whole life and he married both women. So when he met my stepmom, he was 70 and she was 60. And I love and will always cherish. We went on our first little family vacation together, and I went to get a drink of water in the little condo at about 10:30 at night, and I saw my stepmom in her little thong and my dad's oversized shirt running back to their room. And my dad was giddy and he was so happy. And we're never too old to be. And that's why I'm saying, like, we get to wear thongs and we get to feel sexy and we get to have amazing sex and we get to do all those things. So don't give up on your dream because you're afraid of it. Just learn how. Just learn how.
Love it. All right. So talk just a little bit about what you do, where people can find you,
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of what we've talked about, the how-tos, are all on our podcast, The Dating Den. And we have a boatload of how to date during COVID on our website, datingwithdignity.com. We're breaking it down, what to say, how to do it, how to have the conversation about how I do distancing and you do distancing. Lots of goodies there. So datingwithdignity.com, you can find the show, you can find the blog and everything we do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh my gosh, this was fun. Thank you for inviting me.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.